Hi, I'm Aris Efting, and along with my colleagues Shauna Hansen and Brandon Drucker, we're going to tell you about the City of Tacoma's Purple Bag pilot project. We learned about Seattle's Purple Bag program a couple years ago and thought it was such a great idea, so we recently implemented our own program. Seattle and David Hare in particular were incredibly helpful, providing insights and resources to help us get started. We also look to our neighbor to the south, Portland, for guidance since they have a similar program. This slide shows different types of environmental services property throughout the city. The purple dots identify areas that have had continuous encampments for as long as we can remember. The pink dots identify areas with occasional camps, and the green dots have no known encampments. This map also shows opportunity areas, indicating disparities between communities. Areas of lower opportunity are in yellow, and they get darker with increased opportunity. South and East Tacoma tend to have more low opportunity areas, and you'll notice that most of the sites with continuous encampments or purple dots are located in these low opportunity areas. Schuster Slope is the only exception to this, located right here. And this is most likely because it's a larger 30+ acre forested location adjacent to downtown. We've seen a significant uptick in the number of encampments on our environmental services site since COVID began. And these camps haven't been dispersed in general due to CDC guidance, which states, if individual housing options are not available, allow people who are living unsheltered or in encampments to remain where they are. The idea behind this was to ensure that service providers would know where to find the unsheltered persons when services became available, and to reduce the risk of spreading COVID throughout the community. Another recommendation by the CDC is to improve sanitation in encampments, which was part of the impetus for the Purple Bag pilot. Encampments can have severe environmental impacts, including damaged vegetation and increased erosion that can also result in increased sediment and nutrients in surface water runoff and loss of slope stability. Garbage and human waste often end up in our surface waters, resulting in pollution and increased nutrients and bacteria, some of which can be harmful. I'll show you some examples of this in the next couple slides. This image on the left shows a camp at the edge of a steep slope where campers have denuded the slope of vegetation and undercut this tree to create shelter, thus destabilizing the slope. And this area is also prone to landslides. The picture on the right shows garbage left at an encampment that includes a pre-2010 air conditioner, which has the potential to leak Freon. And we commonly find gas-powered equipment left behind at abandoned encampment sites. Steep vegetated slopes, wetlands, and streams are all critical areas in the left-hand photo that have been impacted by garbage. The photo on the right shows supplies used for brushing teeth and washing dishes and clothes in the water below, which happens to be a stormwater outflow. Not only is this bad for water quality, it's unsafe for the campers using this water for personal hygiene, jeopardizing their health. Environmental and human health impacts from encampments are being seen around the country. Studies from California and Tennessee have indicated that encampments with just 40 people can cause severe water quality impairment. In San Diego County, fecal indicator bacteria from encampments has resulted in 30% more bacteria than leaking wastewater pipes or all animal waste combined. Texas has floatables or floating garbage as part of their NPDES permit. And California Water Control Board has water bodies that are 303D listed for fecal indicator bacteria, requiring TMDLs to be specifically developed that address reducing bacteria from the encampments. There are some diseases that can readily spread throughout these encampments, including Shigella bacteria and hepatitis A virus. There are also diseases that can threaten encampments, such as typhus. Finally, it can be risky to live outside. This image shows a tree limb that was about 15 inches in diameter that fell during a windstorm and landed inches from a tent. This could have easily injured or killed the campers in the tent had it landed on them. And now I'm going to pass you on to Shauna Hansen.
Thank you, Aris. Given all these factors that Aris just outlined, the Environmental Programs Group, which includes our passive open space program, as well as our NPDES permit compliance group, decided to pilot the purple bags. We decided to start small with our first goal to establish regular waste pickup service at one homeless encampment on an open space that had been a consistent encampment area and currently had about 6 to 8 groups living there. The second goal, of course, to limit the harmful impacts of improperly disposed waste on human health and our environment. And the third goal related to improving sanitation at the encampments during COVID-19. We were able to use some dedicated CARES Act funding to purchase the first batch of purple bags to support this goal. I also wanted to highlight how the purple bag program potentially supports some elements of the NPDES stormwater permit. Although we don't have specific TMDLs or other regulatory drivers to address homeless encampment waste specifically, there are several elements of the permit that do relate. By engaging with the community members living at the encampments to clean up the waste, this is one method of encouraging public participation in implementing the goals of the stormwater management program. And if designed properly, it could also serve as a public behavior change program under public education and outreach. When encampments are near a storm drain or a receiving water, then we are often looking at an illicit discharge detection and elimination issue. And finally, because in many cases the encampments are nearby open drainage systems and ditches, then our stormwater maintenance staff have to deal with the accumulated waste, and it becomes an O&M issue. And in the case of the encampments on open space properties in Tacoma, most of these properties are either on steep slopes or in wetland and stream buffers. So cleaning up the encampment sites also supports our critical areas preservation ordinance by helping to maintain the critical areas. And because this type of cleanup is done by hand, it's an allowed activity under our critical areas ordinance. About 6 years ago, the City of Tacoma stood up its Office of Equity and Human Rights and established 5 equity goals that help guide everything we do as a department. This program to expand waste management services to unsheltered individuals at the encampments is helping to provide more equitable service delivery to some of the most impacted community members in our city, as well as providing purposeful engagement to partner with them to keep their sites clean while they are living outside, and also supporting the basic human rights of sanitary living conditions. So in this way, the program is touching on 3 out of the 5 equity goals. This page is from a summary of feedback the city received into a 2020 community survey about a broad list of community issues. When asked, what major issue do you think Tacoma will face in the next 10 years? The most frequently called out concern was homelessness in every council district in the city. And you can see it was mentioned twice as many times as any other issue. And in fact, the third and fourth most mentioned concerns were also related to housing affordability and housing accessibility. So the Purple Bag program is also responding to a need that we know the community is broadly concerned about. Given the high amount of concern and the complexity of feelings about the encampments in Tacoma, we thought very intentionally about the outreach to prepare folks for kicking off the pilot program. We briefed the City Council and sent out a mailer with a link to the project website to homeowners in the immediate vicinity to let them know the purple bags were coming. And within the first few weeks of starting the program, we also presented to the members of the Coalition to End Homelessness, which is a local group of activists and homeless service providers, to be subject matter experts and give us feedback about the program. And early in the pilot, the Tacoma News Tribune also interviewed Aris and posted a news article which definitely got the word out. We were a little nervous about what the general reactions would be to the news of the program, and there were a few adverse reactions, but generally most of the feedback has been positive and asking us when we can expand the program to other neighborhoods. We want to show you this interview because it gives a good sense of the scope of the encampment site we are working on. And then after that, Brandon will give you an overview of the exciting stuff about the program implementation, the results we've seen so far, and the next steps for the program.
We're calling this the Purple Bag Pilot Project, and we are providing bags to one of our city open space sites where we have a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness. We're providing the bags to not only help them keep their sites clean, but also to help protect the environment surrounding the area.
Hello. Are you in there?
They don't have anywhere to put their garbage, and most of the time people who are in these situations actually do want to keep their camps clean. So today is the first day that we actually handed the purple bags out. We explained to people what it is that we wanted them to do with them, kind of asked them how many they thought they would use every week, and also tried to find out about some of the other needs they might have in terms of PPE and other things that might help them with the COVID situation.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
So at the end of the trail, we do have a sign that lets people know where to drop off their purple bags, because we're going to be picking the purple bags up once a week. We want people to know that we don't think the purple bags are a permanent solution. It's just something that we're using right now to help keep these sites clean until we can find permanent housing for all the people that are experiencing homelessness.
All right, thanks, Shauna and Aris. So we took several steps in order to implement this project collaboratively. We started with the city's 311 call center. We informed 311 operators about the project, knowing they regularly receive calls about homelessness and garbage. We made clear that any bags found by community members outside of the pilot site should be documented via 311. Next, we talked with Neighborhood and Community Services, which is the city department tasked with primary response to homelessness. Our main ask to them was that they assist with outreach at the time of bag distribution. We also worked with the city's emergency management department. They connected us with masks and hand sanitizer through the CARES Act. And at that point, we were ready to begin distribution. So in December of last year, we started passing out bags every Thursday. We directed pickup by the cleanup contractor every Friday using an existing citywide cleanup contract. Data is sent from that cleanup contractor every Friday. I'll share some additional details about that in the next slide. And finally, we wanted to share information with the larger community through events such as Municon. So by week 12, we had collected enough data to reasonably conclude that purple bags were working. They were being used by most folks living at the pilot site. We had passed out 395 purple bags and collected 281 for a 71% return rate, which honestly exceeded our expectations. We also found some unsheltered persons had other non-purple colored trash bags on hand, and they put these out for collection too. We recorded these separately so they did not affect the return rate. All in all, over 19,000 pounds of trash was removed from the site by week 12. So the status quo for most land managers is cleanup after encampments have been abandoned. These reactive cleanups are very expensive because the trash and environmental impacts build and compound over time. Reactive cleanups can take several days, especially in natural areas that are difficult to access, such as steep slopes. By comparison, we found purple bags only take about 2 hours for the contractor to run out there, pick up, and then drop off at the landfill. It's really difficult to compare these two cleanup methods apples to apples. Ultimately, it's going to depend on how long the purple bag program runs at each site. Both types of cleanups have occurred at this pilot site, and the numbers reflect proactive purple bags. That approach is cost effective. So the pilot project has been successful overall, but there has also been some trial and error and adjustments made along the way. One issue we had early on was bags being ripped open. So people living on site reported that non-resident people just walking by, they would find this central drop-off area with lots and lots of bags, and they would dig through everything, which can create quite a big mess, as seen in this photo. So they thought it would be better to just leave bags outside their individual camps. So that's what we did. We found direct distribution to individual camps also worked best. We initially asked folks if they had any use for a sharps container. Everyone said no. However, sharps were found in the bags and around the site. So we might consider putting a few out in the future at other sites. At the end of 12 weeks, nearly everyone had actually left the site. So we started out with around 12 people living on the site, and there were anywhere from 1 to 3. It's kind of difficult to tell by week 12. Some people come and go. So where did most of those folks go? So several were connected with housing through ongoing outreach by the Homeless Outreach Team, which is under Neighborhood and Community Services. The coordinator of the Homeless Outreach Team agrees that there is potential to build bridges through this program, which help to move more people into housing. But at this point, we don't really have a big enough sample size to say, this is a primary driver at the pilot site. Some folks likely shifted off of city property due to just increased presence. And I feel confident saying this because at the same time as we saw the number of people dwindling on city property, we saw it increasing on adjacent tribal and private properties. Making sure that other solid waste providers and pickup folks aren't picking up purple bags is important because that would confuse the data. So I wanted to call that out as well. So in terms of next steps, we are all really looking forward to transitioning to the next stage, which will involve program expansion. So we've heard lots of strong support for expansion from the community. We want to see other natural areas cleaned up and conditions improve across the city. Expansion will be coordinated by a new homeless outreach team staffer. They'll have increased capacity, and this will be one of their primary job duties. We definitely want to explore additional opportunities to work with unsheltered persons and networks such as the Pierce County Coalition to End Homelessness as well. And then finally, once a site has been abandoned, we must begin the task of ecological restoration. So many of the encampment areas have highly compacted and disturbed soils. Vegetation has been stripped, as Aris showed earlier in some of those early slides. And we just can't leave it like that because there are serious implications for slope stability and environmental function. This abandoned camp, which you saw in the video earlier, this is at the pilot site. It's an extremely steep slope, and it was completely denuded. Large trees were undercut, just out of frame. Soil was shifting around, and the slope was actually failing in one area. This is that same slope after restoration. So one of the goals of the passive open space program that I work for is to restore these disturbed areas based on best available science and management practices. In this case, an erosion control blanket was applied to a steep slope, and over 700 majority evergreen and deep-rooted plants were installed. This is very challenging work. Fortunately, we have Washington Conservation Corps crews that are sponsored by the city that are up to the task. So you can see them here rappelling down the steep slope and staking in that blanket. They typically do this work after areas have been treated for invasive weeds like blackberry or English ivy, but we've been performing this work more and more after encampment-associated disturbances. Thank you for listening, everybody. we are hopeful that purple bags will continue to improve sanitation for homeless community members and continue to limit environmental impacts. On its own, this program will not solve homelessness, but it is a big step forward and something that we have the unique opportunity to do as an environmental services provider. Thanks again.
So I'm David Hare. I'm with Seattle Public Utilities. We started our Purple Bag program about 3.5 years ago. Just real quickly wanted to touch, the reason we chose purple bags is not only that they're highly visible, is that certain solid waste in certain bags colors at a solid waste transfer station or disposal site represent different hazards. And so, for instance, a red bag is a bio waste bag. An orange bag could have other sort of low level hazardous waste in it. So we tried to choose a color that that didn't represent anything, that sort of stood alone. Here we have a program or some pictures. We're showing some of the encampments, some of the purple bags. We also expanded this to recreational vehicles and people who are living in vehicles, in addition to those who are living unsheltered outdoors. We also have an RV septic tank pumping program, because for our NPDES permit, one of the issues we had was folks were dumping and emptying their septic tanks into the storm drains. So we had this, started off our encampment trash pilot. I won't really touch on a whole lot of this since you've seen so much of it. But in addition to our purple bag program, we have the RV remediation pilot program, and that is where we go to encampments where there are RVs and vehicles. And we found that folks who are living in RVs, vehicles, and structures tend to have more larger items that don't fit into the purple bags. So we come in and collect those. We do about bi-weekly in the certain encampments or RV encampments. We have 30 programs or 30 encampments that we serve on a weekly or bi-weekly basis for our purple bag program, and about 18 programs or 18 encampments that are RVs. So real quick, I wanted to talk about really lessons learned. COVID has created not only a challenge, but an opportunity. With folks sheltering in place, we weren't moving people around. Prior to COVID, the only time we had contact with folks was either when we were handing out the purple bags or when we were letting them know that they needed to relocate. So in having folks stay in the same place, we actually were able to have these deeper relationships and these deeper conversations. And so we expanded our public education and outreach program. When we're out handing out purple bags, we're actually see that and view that as an opportunity to connect with folks, to find out what their needs are. We have expanded our public education or our outreach program for that. Includes things like Narcan and sharps disposal. We also have folks who are system navigators who can answer questions to folks who are living outside about anything they might need, how to get an ID, how to find shelter, how to get healthcare services. And so again, anytime that we have contact with folks in Seattle, we really feel that we should maximize on that by informing folks not only about what they can do to protect the environment while they're living unsheltered, but also what services are available to them. So we've collected about, that's 359,000. I can't see my screen. I believe that our encampment trash program has collected over 1 million pounds of trash. We've reached out to probably about 2,000 people, and that's about right for what we have in folks who are living unsheltered consistently in an encampment. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about, since we're talking about water quality and we've seen some of the issues that you face as NPDES permit compliance folks, that we are working with a team called Four Hopes, and it's for homeless outreach, public engagement services. And they have developed this sort of a 3-prong process that allows us to mitigate issues like you've seen, where we have folks that are living outdoors, but living in a canyon, living near a stream. It's really the challenge that we had was, how do we reach them? How do we incorporate them into the services? And if there is an issue of their camping that's impacting the NPDES permit, which is more likely than not, is how do we develop a process to contact those folks and get them services, get them to relocate, and then come in and mitigate the issue. And so this homeless outreach and public engagement services is basically set up sort of a four-pronged process. And the first process is that everybody has to figure out how you're going to communicate. And that not only includes what we call our homeless customers. So we have to figure out how we're going to communicate with them, who has a trusting relationship with them that's going to best allow them to engage with someone living outdoors that they can trust, they can talk to. We have found that, people who are living outside, especially the further you get away, sort of from the urban areas, that having someone that people trust is the most effective way. We have sent out uniformed police officers, and quite honestly, that is very traumatic for folks, and so they don't want to engage, and rarely will they even come outside. So when we're talking about communication, we're talking about not only how do we communicate with that person that we need to get services to, or we may need to relocate, or we want to participate in a purple bag program. We're also talking about all the other folks that are going to be involved in the process, the outreach folks. Like you said, we would eventually need at the end of the relocation to restore that slope. Once we've established a line of communication for everybody, everyone collaborates. We have a meeting, sort of a scoping meeting on what the issue is, what the challenges are, how we're going to get in there, how we're going to get folks out. We've encountered issues where we have folks who are disabled, or have become disabled when they're living outside. And so sometimes we have to figure out how we're actually going to relocate that person out of the area. Lastly, what they do is we just connect everybody together. We pick a date, everybody shows up, everyone knows what their role is. And then the final step is when we complete the relocation and we complete getting someone services or help them relocate, we develop what I call common unity. And once we have a common unity, we have the foundation for community. But in this case, for NPDES issues, once we go through these steps, what we really have is NPDES compliance. But it's not just compliance, it's what we also like to call compassionate compliance. We really do see these opportunities when we see folks who are living unsheltered that need to be relocated, again, really as an opportunity to get them services. I would say, as far as getting folks into housing, that when we are encountering folks where we need to relocate them and we follow this process, we have a much higher success rate in getting folks to get off the street. When we're finding folks who are living up in canyons and things like this, they've become so isolated that just reaching out to them and that connection and knowing that there is services, knowing that they're not alone, is a big part of getting folks to feel comfortable in coming back inside. We just have folks who are out there and they've just been so isolated for so long that the first thing again is that we need to get them connected. So there's Heidi Wells is heading up 4Helps. There's her email, hello@4hopes.com. There's her phone number. And then my email is davidhare@seattle.gov. What we were talking about doing with the city of Tacoma is, maybe if you're interested, you could email myself or Heidi. We're thinking about having a sort of secondary meeting on how we could help cities develop a process and develop something where when they do encounter a situation where there are homeless folks who are living outdoors and impacting NPDES permits specifically, that we could help you identify a process. So after you leave today, feel comfortable in knowing that there will be, if you're interested in attending another session that's not related to this, we'll just have a Zoom call with everybody who's interested, and we'll just sort of go through what we do, help you establish a process. And then I think more importantly, that we all just stay in touch and share success stories. I think it's best that we just learn from each other in something new like this. So that is my presentation, and I think we'll have questions and answers later. So we'll see you there at the questions.
Yeah. Thanks, David. So right now there aren't any questions in the chat. If you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and the other presenters, if you all want to turn your cameras on to answer questions, that would be great. Okay, there is a question from Gail. The program that issues needles should be required to assist the collection of used needles in every city where they issue needles to reduce the impact of diseases. Those program administrators remain complicit in dirty needles being disposed of haphazardly. Has anyone tried to get their participation?
So we have in Seattle, since we recognize that this is a large issue, we actually work, one of our outreach contractors is the Hepatitis Education Project. They are working directly with folks who commonly use needles. They are the ones who actually not only reach out and try to collect those needles, but also provide education on wound care, use of Narcan, and things like that. So it is important that any of the outreach providers, that they have that connection. And typically what happens in these needle distribution programs is that folks are coming in and they are getting their needles, and then and they're going out and they're using them offsite, if you will. Unfortunately, when people are using, you're not so diligent on how you dispose of those needles in the first place. A lot of folks are. So again, it's all about finding and connecting with the right people to do the right outreach to folks and teach them what to do and what services are available.
Yeah, and sorry, in Tacoma with our pilot program, as you heard in the presentation, we did ask everybody first, if they thought they might need needle collection containers, and they all said no. But then if they did start, we were observing them, in the trash bags. And so I think one of the questions, we did reach out to the needle exchange in Tacoma as well about this. And one of the questions we had was, for a permanent, do we do a permanently installed one, like a station, or do we just offer individual collection containers to each camper there? And we didn't ever really come to because this was a temporary program too at this site, and eventually the hope was that everybody would either find shelter or move off site, and so then we'd have to remove the station anyway, as we restored the habitat area. So we're still kind of in question about if how we would do that, but definitely a very important service. You're right.
And we've also found in Seattle that so different camps, like anywhere else, like different camps are different communities, and you may have a camp where there is folks that are high users, and then we have camps where there are none. And that is the other thing that we found, is that when we originally started going out and asking everybody if they needed needle disposal, the folks who were not using were very offended that we would assume. And this is really when we get into an equity issue. Even though folks are living unsheltered, everybody is different and everybody's situation is different. Homelessness is like your fingerprint. I mean, everyone goes through their own different process and falling into homelessness. So it's very important when we're talking about equity work. And again, everything that we've done, the reason we get incredible compliance is that we really focus on how do we deliver this in a way where we build trust with folks. It really is about compassionate compliance and getting folks to get on board, and doing that by establishing any relationship. So it is important that you have folks that know your community, and know the different sort of nuances of each encampment, so you aren't coming out trying to develop that relationship based on trust and immediately offending somebody. And we really look at encampments in Seattle as underserved communities. And when we look at through that lens of an underserved community and our RSJI lens, it really helps us to identify how do we outreach folks and what are their specific needs, without having a blanket generalization of because you're living out unsheltered, you have all the same issues. So that's important when you're doing your public outreach.
Okay, so the next question, and there's a thank you thrown in there. So thanks for all your good work. Once a site is restored, have any become encampments again? So that's mostly for David, I think.
So, there are some things, I mean, I have to say, so what you would want to do is, the answer to that is yes. I mean, typically places that are camped, even when they've been cleared for any reason, sometimes folks just leave. They're often, right, they become sort of a known spot. And so there are things that we do to sort of stop that from happening. I mean, folks, just because they're folks who are living unsheltered, we're all still people. And so when you see, like, for instance, that landscape netting that was put out, that really is something that just says, hey, this is not a place to camp, and respect this, and people do. And so when we're talking about sort of re-securing a site so it doesn't get recamped, there's just a variety of things that we can do. That's a great one that shows, hey, this is don't camp here. And that's how we keep places from being, recamped. We sort of just re-energize the area. We have a lot of activity in the area. And when people know that when we get people again on this relationship and we say, hey, look, this area, it needs to be restored. And we typically get good compliance that way. So anything you can do that is sort of a visual sort of barrier of saying, to let people know that, hey, this is not an area for you to set up the tent, you get pretty good compliance from that.
Yeah, I agree. And at our Tacoma site, that area hasn't been touched, at least not since I've been out there, but down the hill a bit, there's this poor tree that someone keeps pulling out because it doesn't have any of the nice matting around it. So we need to get Brandon on that. Okay, the next question. So Mark has two questions. Was it difficult for contractors to handle the purple bag waste or to find a disposal site due to the sharps and needles? We'll start with that one.
So again, that's why we chose a colored bag versus a black bag. We have 2 transfer stations in Seattle that the waste goes to. So we work with our transfer station staff and all of our collection contractors to know that if there is a purple bag, it should be treated with caution. When it goes to the transfer station, that's again why the color is purple. It allows folks to know that there may be some hazards that are in that bag and to treat it with additional caution.
Aris or Shauna, did you have anything to add?
Honestly, I would say the same thing that David said. And I know that also our contractor does carry sharps containers with them in case they do find needles on the ground, and then properly dispose of those.
Okay, and his other question, are there any other programs in the works related to the unsheltered, like a program to address fecal coliform?
We are working, we recognize that there are 2 types of waste, right? Human waste and solid waste coming out of encampments. It, unfortunately, because you don't see the human waste element, but coming from a water quality standpoint, has probably a larger threat than solid waste has. So we are recognizing that. We are trying to work with folks. To be honest with you, with homelessness and human waste, it's been something that folks just don't want to talk about. And so we are implementing hygiene stations, but we're having some lessons learned from that. Even with COVID, we implemented these hygiene stations, which had hand washing stations, but because of COVID, our Parks and Recs department has shut off all of the water fountains and drinking fountains throughout the city. So folks were actually using these sanitation centers to fill up their water bottles, and there was high levels of bacteria in that water because it was not potable water. So we are recognizing, right, like lessons learned. We're trying to work on sort of the liquid waste side of things. And again, this is something where with COVID being in place, we were able to sit down and have these sort of uncomfortable conversations with folks about, what do you really do, and how do you, what are you doing? And then that has allowed us to learn. And now we're starting to develop some new programs around that feedback.
Yeah, so, we know that this is a definite need, and again, we need to have conversations about it because it's unclear how to handle it at this point. I know that, in situations where other organizations that we work with have put out portable toilets, they've come back and found them full of needles and, being unsafe for the people that need to use them. So we're not sure right now how to address this. And again, as David mentioned, it's some conversations that need to happen.
Okay, so Gail has a question about, so she says, some homeless individuals suffer from mental illness. Have you thought about changing laws to have people put in mental health facilities? She knows changing laws can be complex, but it would be a good start to a permanent solution.
So that's something that our program doesn't necessarily have any control over, but I will say that at least one of the people that I'm aware of that was camping on one of our pilot sites was able to go into a tiny home village where one of the focuses was mental health, because he was aware he has PTSD. And so just being out there and being on site and getting to know a lot of the campers, along with our homeless outreach team, enabled us to, establish a relationship with them and helped to find them opportunities, I think.
Yeah, so our outreach program, again, like we try to use every contact with everybody as an opportunity to get them the services they need and sort of walk them through things. First of all, hi Gail, how are you doing? We are actually finding, again, after COVID and being able to have these conversations, that we're coming up with a new way. That's actually started the conversation with this Four Hopes group. What we're actually finding is that we originally thought that the bottleneck was the fact that there were so many people doing outreach, and then once it came to mental health providers, that there was this bottleneck and folks just weren't getting services. What we found in the last month in really talking to folks about how do we free that up and how do we get folks referred into mental health services, the bottleneck is not at the service level provider, it's at the intake level. And so what's really just happening is that folks who are trained in outreach, even if you're working in a shelter, you sort of have your specialized area. So we are actually working on ways to provide those folks the information and access that they need so they can plug people in. It really is like anything. I mean, we have in Seattle, we have 4 outreach workers and they are amazing. But when they're engaging, with one person at a time, even they have limited resources. And I mean, as a human being, to show up in a very traumatic situation, talking to somebody who's experienced severe trauma, limits your ability to try to provide that help. So we are working on a process in a way that will get rid of that bottleneck at the intake level and allow those outreach workers the services and resources they need so they could refer folks to mental health care. And we're looking at it from that position instead of changing laws. I mean, under mental health issues, it is really just best. It's going to be impossible for us to make that happen of passing a law. So what we think the best way to do this is to allow people access to information, and folks who are struggling, they know they're struggling. And when we can get them plugged in and connected at that moment, in that moment, that is the best way to get folks the mental health care they need.
Agreed. And also our environmental services program is in the process, I should say, of hiring someone who has this expertise, understanding a little bit about environmental restoration, but also having that background of, working with people who have been experiencing homelessness and knowing about what all these different services are. So when they're going on our sites, they're going to be able to pass this information along.
All right, Nikki asks a question that I'm sure we all thought about when we started these programs. Do you get backlash from neighbors who perceive the bags as condoning the camping or facilitating longer term occupation?
So we thought that this would happen. We expected it. We actually did. We sent out mailers, postcards to individuals in the neighborhood to let them know this program was going to happen. And in all honesty, we really did not have very many complaints. And I think the result of this program was the public seeing this and wanting more of it. And so there was actually a lot of public pressure to expand this program.
Yeah, and in Seattle, we actually have, really just actually, again, like you said, Aris, the opposite. What we have is folks who, as soon as they saw the Purple Bag program, the immediate question was, what else are you doing? And how are you helping them? I mean, you're just picking up their trash, but come on, I mean, what else are you doing? And so when we explained our education and outreach program and how we use this as a way to contact folks and get them plugged in, we've lately also found, because of COVID, camps are staying longer in the same place. The big question we have from neighbors is, how do we help? And what can we do? How do we get plugged in? How can we all work together to solve a problem? So, when it comes to this, I mean, you would think that there would be backlash of you're giving them what they need to stay in the same place. You're sort of facilitating this. Not at all. It was actually, again, I'm glad you're doing something, but the next question was, what else do we do? How do we do more? And that's just not enough, right? And so, but the great thing is the Purple Bag program, what we found is that sort of olive branch. It is that sort of first connection. It's very benign. We're not coming into an encampment and saying you can't live like this, or what are your issues, what are your problems. As human beings, we have a common denominator, which is that we do care about our environment. And because you lose your home and your job and you are struggling, you don't lose that. When you're falling into homelessness, we don't lose compassion, and we don't actually lose the need or desire to protect our water quality or to recycle. And I think that we just have to recognize that. And that, as like I said, when we started looking at our homeless community as an underserved community, we can at least, and we have an obligation to provide them with basic services. And sanitation is one of those services. We just have to figure out how to do that. And again, it just starts like we're doing right now, having a conversation.
Thanks. So there's no more questions in the chat. I have a quick question or request. Can you tell how your programs are funded?
We are in Seattle. We are funded by the general fund. In Seattle Public Utilities, we sort of have an enterprise fund for our solid waste services, which is a private fee, that is basically funded through your trash bill. This service is funded under the general fund, and the reason we did that is because this service actually touches on multiple issues, right? It touches on healthcare, it touches on public safety. It touches on water quality. It touches on erosion control. It touches on parks. I mean, homelessness really involves, you know, an entire community. So that's why we're general funded.
Aris or Shauna, do you want to answer for us?
Well, so I'm with the open space program, and our program is actually funded by stormwater rates, but we actually started the Purple Bag program using CARES Act funding. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Shauna.
Oh, I was just going to say that the interesting thing, in Tacoma, we have, you know, the Neighborhood and Community Services Department, which is really our key homeless outreach response, the houses that homeless outreach response service. And then we're coming at from Environmental Services Department and Open Space Management Program. And so there's kind of two parallel efforts going on right now in the city. And we're dealing with more focused on ES owned properties and open spaces, and their program focuses more on right-of-way and private property encampments. And so for ours, we already had a private contract for waste cleanup services that we were actually using, and it was quite expensive, you know, as he was saying, you know, these 5-day projects where we go out and vacate the site and then clean up the site. And so we actually continue to use that contract for the Purple Bag pickup as well. So it was the same contractor doing both, but we were already paying money out of surface water to do these cleanups on open space sites. And so it just kind of diverted that to the Purple Bag support.
And again, I'm glad actually you brought the question up, and thank you. I have my favorite saying is the answer to 99 out of 100 questions is money. So when we are talking about that, and Shauna, and thank you, because when we're, again, like I said, when we're general fund, because homelessness touches on so many different parts of our city operations. And so when we're looking at education and outreach, and we're thinking about, you know, our specific programs on how does this impact our NPDES permits, or how does this impact, you know, our management of open space, because there are so many agencies that are involved with this, you don't really need to look at a Purple Bag program or a mitigation program as hey, it all needs to be financed under one roof. Since the outreach and relocation and mitigation of an environmental hazard has so many impacts, it's sort of, we look at it as we basically pull little money from everybody who's involved and who benefits and who needs to have this done for their compliance with whatever it is. So really, it's basically everybody just sort of like a potluck throws in what they got out of education and outreach, and they all throw it into the bucket. And then the next thing you know, there's enough money in that bucket to get everything done that you need done. So that's one way that you could look at it. And again, this is where maybe an offline conversation on how do we finance these things and lessons learned is going to be really helpful for folks about, you know, how do we fund it? What is it going to cost, and who needs to pitch in money, and who needs to be at the table within your city or your county or whatever, or whoever you represent or manage your permit for. And we can do that for you.
And Mark put one more question in the chat. Have you heard of any efforts at the state government level to assist cities with addressing water quality issues due to the unsheltered?
Nope.
Yeah, no. I think, again, the reason that, you know, when we started off on how we were going to give a presentation on the Purple Bag program, it really was, how does this program specifically impact water quality issues? And as far as I know, this is the first conversation that anyone has had at the state level where we are talking about how homelessness does impact water quality. Tacoma, you guys have done just a great job in being able to really identify what those issues are. So again, a separate conversation I think needs to happen. So we can all work together and get lessons learned. We take the best of the best, and then we put together, you know, a program.
Okay, well, thank you all for addressing this topic. If anyone would like more information or to attend a meeting with the City of Seattle and City of Tacoma, you have the contact information and it's posted on the Municon website as well. So thanks for joining us and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.